What was the impact of anti-Semitism in the life of Gustav Mahler? So Gustav Mahler was a maximalist composer in the late 19th century and early 20th century. He was a contemporary of Richard Strauss and early contemporary of Richard Wagner. He was born in around 1860, I believe, and he was born to Jewish parents, so he was Jewish. And then in the late 1860s, early 1870s, Germany and Austria went through what was called Jewish emancipation, where anti-Jewish laws were taken back and the Jewish populations were granted full civil rights. And so during this time, we would see a lot of successes for the Jewish community in this part of Europe. Lots of Jewish students and professionals in medicine, education, sciences, engineering, and as well as art and music. However, despite this, there was still a lot of underlying hostility towards Jews. And so this is what led Gustav Mahler to convert to Catholicism. However, despite his flip-flopping religious views, Mahler was personally an agnostic. But for this video, that's neither here nor there. Now, understand that during this time of Jewish success, there was underneath it all a gradually building pan-German nationalism that would reject anything not German, and this included Jews, because in their minds, Jews were not German enough. And the other thing was, at this time, anti-Semitism had begun to move beyond religious prejudice into racial bigotry. So it did not matter to these people that Gustav Mahler converted to Catholicism. He was still Jewish. Because again, as I just said, it was no longer just a religious thing, it was now a racial thing. Went from religious prejudice to racialized bigotry. So being Jewish was no longer a matter of practicing the wrong religion, or at least not just practicing the wrong religion. It was now a matter of being the wrong kind of human being, or rather, not a human being. Now, despite this, Mahler was actually pretty successful, especially after he converted to Catholicism and he became the director of the Vienna Court Opera. And during this time, his work as director as well as composer was very well received to the public. And there was at least one newspaper in Vienna that was dogmatically anti-Semitic towards him. However, their attacks didn't really stick with the general public. And any other negative criticism from newspapers was not a criticism of him being Jewish, but rather just, as related to him being a musician and composer. Now, at this time, he also made a number of changes to the Vienna Court Opera, being a lot stricter about not allowing audience members to walk in late to a performance, as well as holding the musicians to higher standards, as well as playing the entirety of Wagner operas like Parsifal, like those from the Ring Cycle, instead of just smaller sections of it. And then something that enraged the small but growing anti-Semitic crowd at this time was he added additional brass to a performance of Beethoven 3, to which this particular newspaper remarked, well, perhaps you should, bring in some Jewish musicians from Israel rather than our musicians. I guess our Aryan musicians are not good enough for you. But even so, these critiques really didn't stick to Mahler very much in the minds of the general public. He was still quite popular. Now, eventually, Mahler would leave this position in 1907, not related to anti-Semitism, really, but more to how the administration of the Vienna Court Opera was clashing with him over his desire to leave for a couple months each year to go compose. So then the Metropolitan Opera and New York Phil said, hey, if you come over here, we'll be a little more lax about are leave policies, and so that's what Mahler did. He said, you know what, screw you people, I'm out. So he went over to New York City. Now, again, despite his leaving having nothing to do with him being Jewish, the anti-Semitic crowd in Vienna really jumped on this and started spouting a lot of conspiracy theories about what was going on. And they labeled his successor, who was not really an anti-Semite, as, you know, being this crusader for German values, bringing back German values, getting rid of that, you know, ugly Jewishness that Mahler had brought in. And to the point where in 1908, there was actually a huge brawl outside of the Vienna Court Opera between the Mahler and Wagner crowd going against the anti-Semitic, anti-Mahler crowd. So there you go. And the other thing to keep in mind is this is an example of how World War II was not something that forced anti-Semitism onto Germany, including anti-Semitism in music. Rather, this is something that had been building up for a very long time, and this kind of nationalism and bigotry would grow exponentially after World War I, which would very directly lead into some of the causes of World War II.